like to share some thoughts on the teachings of Interbeing by Thich Nhat Hanh. Thai, as he was often called by his students, would say, we are. So my understanding of this teaching is not only are we not separate, we are also more than simply connected. And one way Thai used to explain this is by pointing out that a flower is made up of non-flower parts. This would be kind of confusing. What is meant by non-flower parts? And Thai would explain that a flower is made up of rain and sunshine and of nutrients from the soil and so on. As a matter of fact, if you actually tried to look at a flower, you'd have a hard time finding what makes it the flower. And humans are made of non-human parts as well. So this is an excerpt from something Thai wrote. There's a biologist named Lewis Thomas, whose work I appreciate very much. He describes how our human bodies are shared, rented, and occupied by countless other tiny organisms without whom we couldn't move a muscle, drum a finger, or think a thought. Our body is a community, and the trillions of non-human cells in our body are even more numerous than the human cells. And without them, we could be here in this moment. I'm sorry, could not be here. Without them, we wouldn't be able to think, to feel, or to speak. There are, he says, no solitary beings. The whole planet is one giant, living, breathing cell with all its working parts linked in symbiosis. You know, and Thai would also teach that our ancestors are in us, in our genetics, but not just in our genetics. I mean, maybe when you look in the mirror, you might see bits and pieces of other people in your family. But he also taught that we are the actions that left an impression on us as well. So we are made up of what we've gone through, interacted with others, how we were cared for. And it's also true of the actions of others who are not relatives and things we've learned or experienced with them. So for example, the teachings of the Buddha can become part of who we are, or the love of a friend. These are all parts of us. And indeed, when you get down to a subparticle level, we are all made of star stuff. Here's a quote from Neil deGrasse Tyson, an American astrophysicist. Recognize that the very molecules that make up your body, the atoms that construct the molecules, are traceable to the crucibles that were once the centers of high mass stars that exploded their chemically enriched guts into the galaxy, enriching pristine gas clouds with the chemistry of life, so that we're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, and to the rest of the universe atomically. That's kind of cool. Tyson goes on to say, that makes me smile. And I actually feel quite large at the end of that. It's not that we are better than the universe. We're part of the universe. We're in the universe, and the universe is in us. Always love when I get to the part of my class that I teach at Mary Baldwin University, where I teach this to them. So young people especially, though certainly not only, can struggle to feel worthwhile simply because they just are. But it's hard to argue with your worthiness when you know you are made of the same amazing material as the stars and the planets and the universe. I also like to point out to students how miraculous their existence is. The invitation to consider how many things had to come together over an uncountable amount of time to create you is nothing short of astounding. This is dependent arising. Thich Nhat Hanh states, the Buddha expressed interdependent co-arising very simply. This is because that is. This is not because that is not. This comes to be because that comes to be, and this ceases to be because that ceases to be. And perhaps we can pause for a moment and contemplate the very real fact that we could not exist if it were not for everything that came together to make that happen. So just giving that a moment to contemplate. And we could not continue to exist without everything that supports us to continue. Without the sun, without rain, without the earth, without the energy that comes from the sun that is contained by the plants and then consumed by us. And without the many people who support our existence through growing and delivering food and needed supplies, who maintain the environment around us, those who provide the support and care that we need. I would offer a simple teaching of holding a pen and stating there could be no this without that. There could be no left without right. The pin cannot exist without the left and the right. There's no up without down. There's no happy without sad. We might wish it to be different, but it simply cannot be different. Though we know this to be true, and we become quite upset at the existence of the side that we don't like or that we think is bad in some way. I told a simple story about interbeing. He said, I remember one day I was trying to hang a picture. My right hand, holding a hammer, and my left hand, one nail. He said, I was not very mindful this morning. Instead of pounding on the nail, I pounded on my left finger. So right after that, my right hand put down the hammer and took care of my left hand in a very friendly way. And there's nothing that is the helper, and there's nothing that is helped. Thich explained that the right hand took care of the left hand like it takes care of itself. He describes how the right hand does not complain about the left hand, and the left hand does not seek revenge against the right. But there is often another process involved in this story, and that is our own unwholesome reaction to pain. Often the mind wants to blame something or someone for the pain. If we can find something or someone to blame, we believe we can see a reason for what has happened. The world doesn't have to feel so much out of our control. When we are afraid or in pain, we contract and thoughts can seem very real. Andrew Holacek says, fear is the affect expression of ignorance. Fear is the affect or emotional expression of ignorance. I'm coming up on 12 years as a cancer survivor. I sometimes think about those cancer cells. I don't think they knew that they were a problem. I don't think they intended to be a problem. I think, like so many other things like viruses and mosquitoes, maybe even black holes, they're doing what they need to do in order to continue to be. This contemplation helps me to look at things more broadly in working with acceptance of interbeing and the way things are. Thich wrote a powerful poem in the 1970s that many people may know, entitled "Call Me by My True Names." It was and can be experienced as unsettling in its discussion of how we are both the victim and the perpetrator as manifestations of interbeing. I'll share an excerpt now, but will not read the whole thing as it may be too activating. Do not say that I'll depart tomorrow, because even today I still arrive. Look deeply. I arrive in every second to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with wings still fragile, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, in order to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that are alive. I am the mayfly metamorphosing in the surface of the river. And I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in the clear pond, and I am also the grass snake who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. It can be challenging to contemplate what Thich shares here. To let be that things are the way they are. And to let go the suffering that comes with wanting them to be different. I recently listened to Gil Fronsdale discussing letting be and letting go. It was a helpful discussion to me of how they are two different processes and are valuable to the practice of not clinging or acceptance. Fronsdale describes letting be much as we have already been contemplating, which is having the wisdom to see that things cannot be different than they are in this moment and are due to all the causes and conditions that led to this moment. He says letting go is not letting go of things, but letting go of cravings and ill will. Fronsdale says it's always important that you feel better because of letting go. Letting go is not a deprivation, it's a form of generosity. If we feel deprived letting go, it's not really letting go. So we often think that acceptance means being okay with the way things are, but it doesn't. It just means we stop using precious energy to fight with the way things are. Once we let go of fighting against the way things are, we can see them more clearly, the way things are, and then see what actual options are available to us to respond. I certainly did not say to myself, oh, well, this is the way cancer is, and I'm not going to do anything about it. That is not a wise or wholesome response. But it doesn't help me to see cancer as some kind of enemy, or to linger in a place of not letting be that there is cancer. This is a possible way of interbeing with the difficulties in the world around us. The Buddha talked about people having dust in their eyes when describing ignorance. And I have to say, lately for me, there's times when I look at what's happening, it seems more like mud clumps. The conditions we find ourselves in have arisen through the many, many events that have taken place over an uncountable amount of time. People and our environment are as they are because of this. I'd like to invite us to pause here and contemplate if there are areas of life which you are not accepting things as they are. So if there's areas in your life that you're aware that you're not accepting things as they are. If you're able to touch into some areas of not letting be, what does it feel like to not accept those areas as they are? What do you notice? Maybe where can you even find that in your body? Now maybe just be curious and investigate. What might it feel like if you did accept them? If you did let them be as they are? Does anything shift? What would it feel like to let go of clinging to wanting it to be different? I'd like to share some of Thay's teachings on difficult people and forgiveness. So this is from Thay. When we look at him or her and see the suffering in that person, we see the base of all the acts and words that make you suffer. When you see the suffering in him and in her, we understand this suffering. For you know that that person is not capable of handling, of taking care of the suffering in him or her. They become a victim of the suffering. And we are only victim number 2. When you're able to see the suffering in him or in her and see that person is a victim of his or her own suffering, then it's easy to forgive. Recognize the suffering, understanding the suffering, and having the desire to help that person to suffer less and help you to forgive very easily. Without that kind of understanding, forgiveness is difficult. Even if you want to forgive, you cannot forgive because he or she has made you suffer so many times, so many times. And even you have warned him or her, and they still continue to make you suffer. But if you can understand the suffering, the deep suffering in him, in her, and see that he, that she has been the victim, number one, of his or her own suffering, the situation becomes different. Now, the suggestion is not to allow ourselves to be mistreated or to close our hearts to the suffering of the world. It is to use our practice to allow ourselves to see things as they really are. Manifestations of causes and conditions, and a part of everything. To allow things to be as they are without ill will, and to have greater capacity to make wise decisions in response, reducing our suffering and the suffering of others. I'd like to close with more of Thay's poem. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom in all walks of life. My pain is like a river of tears, so full it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once. So I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true name so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. Now I realize I've perhaps thrown a lot of things out at you this evening. And I'm just interested to hear if anything was confusing or if anything landed in a way that you feel you might be willing to share. If you had any shifts in how you're thinking of things, or even if to a question of what on earth did we just talk about? So. Especially thinking about Thay talking about forgiveness. For me, that's not just an individual. It's not just someone that I know. It's actually thinking more globally. And seeing if we can open our hearts into seeing the suffering of the people who are causing so much suffering. So does anyone feel like you would like to offer any thoughts? So much.
Yeah, it's well, You'll want to thank me when I. Can you? Oh, there we go. It actually has to do with, this is a question, the letting things be as they are. I hear that as valuable in, in accepting that there is a goodness in letting things be as they are. But I wonder if there are moments, or how do you discern moments when we ought to reject the way things are? I think about, some of the most obvious might be in the face of abuse.
Right.
When we might have the capacity to intervene.
Right.
So that's one example. So
Great.
Okay, thanks.
That's great. Kristen?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Can you all still hear me through the, okay, great, because I really. That is a great question. And that's why working with acceptance and letting things be, it can be a very tricky contemplation and thing to work with. And that's why I've tried to say, even with my cancer, the letting things be doesn't mean we don't do something about it, right? So it's not that we let be, if we see something causing harm to someone else, this is just my opinion, and I would love the wisdom in the room for others. But my perspective is, first I have to see what's really here to be seen. So when I'm saying let it be, it doesn't mean that that's okay. It doesn't mean that because I have cancer, I'm just going to live with cancer. But it means, or if there's an abusive relationship, but it means seeing it for what it really is. And not saying like, this is wrong with cancer. I'm going to say cancer because the abuse, it is wrong. How do I want to say it? It's wrong, but it is happening the way it's happening. Okay? So until you can actually see and stop saying, but I don't want it to be this way. That's really the issue when you're trying to say, I don't want it to be this way, so I'm not going to work with the reality of what it is. Then you're putting a lot of energy into fighting against something. Okay? I don't know if I'm answering that correctly, but so you still do something, but then you know what options are available because you see it clearly. I don't know if that helps. Does that help reframe it? Acceptance as things as they are. But then what, right? Daniel Siegel, I don't know if anyone knows him. He is a neuropsychologist, I believe, and he talks about the floor of opportunity opens up for you when you see things clearly. Right? So if you're in a situation that is abusive, or if you know someone's in a situation that's abusive, accepting that that is the case, but we also have to accept what is ours of what we can do and what can be done. So this is my social worker voice coming through here. Great question, Kristen. Yeah. Sidna.
Thank you. I was thinking of not only Martin Luther King, but the many, many people who worked at that phase of the civil rights movement in the peaceful way they learned through the Highland School and so on and so forth. They knew it was wrong. They knew it, but their way of going about it was to resist in a way that actually got incredible attention. And that was then. We're in a new phase of this now. I don't know how we do this now, but I think that's what I see there with Dr. King and the many people throughout this country who worked with him.
Thank you. Yeah.
Adam.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think one thing I was hoping to convey, it has to do with the idea of the second arrow too. The first arrow hurts. Seeing the suffering that's occurring around us, watching what's going on in terms of the environment, doesn't mean that those things don't hurt. But if we spend a lot of our energy into wringing our hands about it, it shouldn't be this way, then we can lose precious ability to then make a choice of something else. So it is this way. What are you going to do? What can you do? But it is this way. Yes. Thank you.
I think that when I was hearing you offer your talk, it's something that helps to reinforce the opening. And it can often be quite paradoxical.
Right.
Because the opening doesn't mean you're opening to letting yourself be a doormat or be abused, or even opening to the atrocities of the world, as much as seeing it in the way that it's occurring or the way it happens. And as counterintuitive as it might seem to open to it, I find that in my experience, the opening actually allows for me to be clearer and more discerning about what I can or can't tolerate, or what I can and can't contribute to.
Right.
Where I have the capacity to place myself. But the opening doesn't mean that I am I was about to say allowing, but there is an allowing,
Yeah.
but I have the ability to then discern more clearly.
Yeah.
And that's the freedom that I experience.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you. Yeah, Kristen, your question is wonderful, actually. Yeah. Yeah, we can become immobilized. We become immobilized by the fretting or it shouldn't be this way, right? Yeah, and I wonder if there's anyone on Zoom who would like to contribute. We'll have a few minutes. Or have any questions.
Anna, this is Helen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Ellen.
Hi. I'm just thinking about Gil Fronsdale's definition of fear. And I guess kind of related to what Kirsten was just talking about, but it seems to me what have experienced at times is that when I let go of trying to push something away or the reality of something, and see it as it is and allow it, or let it see it as it is, that there's less fear around it. And I'm just trying to connect that with Gil Fronsdale's definition. I was really struck by that. The ignorance part of it. Anyway, could you add to that?
Thank you, Helen. And that was actually Andrew Holacek who said, yeah, that quote about that ignorance. I want to make sure I get it right. Yeah, fear is the affective expression of ignorance. So I think what he was saying there is that this is what he's saying, but the only thing to be, when we are afraid, it just means that we are not, like you said, Helen, not ready or able to face or deal with what is actually in front of us. So we become afraid. because we're ignorant of our capacities or of what is arising. Does that help?
I think so.
Yeah, to me, it's a contemplation. Like I see that statement as something to just sit with. So if I'm feeling fear now, this, I think you have to think of it in, at least I think about it in terms of not fear of an immediate something happening to me. So if for example, if something dangerous is running at me or something like that, it's not ignorance to be afraid. But to have fear of actions or fear of, am I going to be good enough, or fear of a future, all of these things have more to do with just not letting things be or knowing. Who's going to help me on this one, Kirsten? Let me take that to you. It's such a, I love that quote so much. Fear is the affective manifestation of ignorance.
I don't know that I can speak to the quote specifically, but picking up where you were just leaving off in terms of fear, can we just be with the uncertainty?
Right.
The uncertainty of whether I'm enough, or what does the future hold? Or, can I be with the uncertainty? And Pema Chodron talks about getting comfortable with uncertainty.
Right.
So I feel like it's honoring that there's the fear. That may be about seeing it for what it is. But for me, I think it's about getting comfortable with the uncertainty
Right.
that often generates fear.
Right. Thank you. And I know we're out of time, but thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, fundamentally, I think as we're talking about in terms of teachings of Dharma, ultimately, I think the idea is that we really have nothing to fear if we are completely able to be present and welcoming of everything. That is a big thing to ask for, though. So, thank you, Helen. All
Thank you.
right. I'm just going to offer a dedication of merit. May all beings live in awareness of non-separation. May all beings choose non-harming, especially since to harm another is to harm the self. And may all beings be peaceful and at ease. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your contemplations and wonderful questions, and for the wisdom that others have offered.